Dante is a Brazilian dog trainer. I met him when I was teaching in a conference down in Brazil, and it was really, really fun to meet him. And I also enjoyed his style for reactivity, that he really works on setting the dogs up for success. Sorry, my full attention is now here. As full as it can be in the days of the internet where we're looking for questions. So Gustavo says, hello, Grisha. Dante, big hug from Portugal. So great
There you
to
go.
see you. Yay. So we have questions. All right. So for those of you just joining us, so Dante is a dog trainer from Brazil, and his specialty originally was, at least I think originally was agility, and then, or performance, and anyway, big shows and that kind of fun thing. And then gradually starting to recover back into reactivity, because it turns out a lot of dogs who need to perform, or we want to perform, are also suffering from reactivity. And so welcome, Dante.
Thank you, Grisha. It's very exciting to be here. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure. And yeah, just recalling when you were here and we met, it was really a lot of fun. I loved watching you teach, and I'm very glad that you enjoyed what I'm doing here, and that I can share a little more about my work, my view on things.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to having you do a class with us, because I think your style will really help a lot of folks.
Yeah, that'll be a lot of fun. I'm very excited about that too.
Yeah. And for those of you watching, so Dante's style is essentially that he really sets the dog up for success in terms of getting their, well, actually, I'll ask him, but my perception of it, and you can tell me if it's right and then build on it, is that regardless of whatever technique we use, and he does use force-free techniques, just for the record, but that foundation of getting the dog into a good emotional state, that where he or she is receptive to the learning, makes it so everything goes faster. So bat goes faster, counter conditioning goes faster, whatever it is. Is that a good summary?
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. It explains exactly like the idea of my work, or at least the initial states of working with reactive dogs. So as you said, doesn't matter which way you want to go after. If you want to do counter conditioning, if you're going to use bat or whatever it is that you're going to use. And when I work with dogs, I do use multiple techniques. I'll just do whatever works for that dog. But the idea is to set up the dogs so that it's not only ready emotionally, or more prepared emotionally, so it's less stressed, its cup is less full, but also that it has experienced different ways of dealing with emotions, with its own emotions. So it's like rehearsing emotional states, and varying, okay, I get excited, and how do I deal with this, and and then teach the dog options so that it knows how to perform. But it's basically it's rehearsing or as much as possible. Doesn't matter how much you rehearse for a play, it's never the same as when you're actually with the crowd watching you. But the more you rehearse, the easier it's going to be. Right? So it's not just knowing the play, the idea. No, you have to rehearse, do it physically. And then when you do it in the real moment, then it's probably going to be much easier. And that's what I think about when I'm training dogs.
Mm-hmm. And that makes sense, especially coming from a performance background.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that totally. And as you said, the idea of teaching dogs to perform in environments that are not natural, and most dogs actually, like domestic dogs that have owners, they are living in settings that are not ideal, right? And then basically what I would do is to use the same techniques, the same concepts for teaching a dog to perform in front of 10,000 people with lights and music, for a dog that actually just has to deal with buses and other dogs and crowds and too much going on around. So the idea would be similar. Of course, it's not the same, but similar concept. Prepare the dog for what's not actually natural. When it's all good and the setup's perfect, it's different. But when things are not less than ideal, then I believe we need to give the dog extra help to deal with those things.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And I think it was Susan Friedman I was talking to recently, that she's really gotten into creating also those fundamental behaviors and really starting from the groundwork and then building out, rather than kind of starting at the place of reactivity.
Oh yeah, yeah, I do. I make a lot of parallels with people, and I do. If we think about ourselves, it just makes sense, right? To start from, actually we do that in training in general, but when we think about reactivity, we seem to go, oh no, we have to go to reactive behaviors and deal with them, or with the stimulus immediately like in front of the dog, or it doesn't matter if it's far, but dealing straight with the stimulus. And I don't think that's actually necessary.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
Sorry, I cut you.
No, that was fine. And so that reminds me of the How to Human class that I'm teaching right now. It's definitely, getting those life skills in place rather than, starting in that difficult situation.
Yeah.
And before we go much further, though, I wanted to have you define what you would consider to be reactivity, or what do you mean by that word? And it doesn't have to be a concise definition, but just generally, what's reactivity mean to you?
Okay. So a lot of people have tried to define it, and I do agree with the fact that, it's basically an overreaction to a stimulus that we consider as normal, or most dogs consider normal, right? But for that one, it's not, or it's not normal to the point that it's not going to react or go, crazy. But I find it also means impulsive or impulsivity of the dog, like a level of impulsivity that somehow, for whatever trigger has happened or has exploded, whatever behavior the dog has shown has been shown, and there's a process where that behavior is somehow reinforced socially, physiologically, in many ways, I actually think, and that's why I try to work in many ways as well, that maintains that behavior. I do believe that reactivity, it starts as an impulse, like just a lack of, brain for that moment, for that one moment. But eventually,
brain anyway.
Yeah, that's what I mean. But it actually becomes learned, and the more it has been learned, or it is practiced, the less it looks like it's practiced, because it becomes so much more natural, just like any other behavior that's very well learned. So it's just like any situation where you have negative reinforcement, and the dog understands, it works, it makes it feel better, and then it does, and it does, and it does, and it does, and then eventually you don't even know what's happening. You just think that it's still just an emotional reaction that has no connection with any learning in the environment. But I do think there's a level of learning at some point in the beginning of this process.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Yeah. Any behavior, I think I agree. Any behavior is subject to the laws of learning once it gets emitted, and it's like, oh, that worked.
Yeah.
And then, the reinforcement will make it continue.
Just when we think about dogs, sometimes we, like, as you said, if that works, I don't think they actually, they realize it that well as the way we do. Yeah. But they feel it. It's more about feeling. And that's also another reason why I believe teaching different ways of feeling things, of expressing and dealing with its own emotions, is very important.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. So let's see, what got you interested in working with reactivity?
I think just like for many people, it's actually having a reactive dog. And when you were here in Brazil, actually, when I did a talk about reactivity, and that was one of the things I said, I had this 7-month-old dog, a border collie, that showed a very strong reaction to another dog. And it really surprised me. I couldn't see that coming at all. And that triggered that interest, of course, having to deal with that, but also understand why that happened. And I couldn't see that coming, right? It was a strong reaction. It actually crossed the street, went attack a big mastiff type dog, and I had this small 7-month-old border collie, and so it made me have to like, okay, there's something going on here, something wrong. That was about 16 years ago, and I was already a dog trainer, and I thought I knew everything I had to know. Obviously, that it still isn't. It's far from being true.
It'll never be the case, but yeah.
No. But that's when it started. And then it happened that I had very scared dogs as well that I ended up adopting for other reasons. And then I had more reactive dogs coming from different places and relationships. And today I have also a reactive dog that has come to my life through, different person. And that just keeps me, seeing different things with my dogs in my own life. But of course, that also led me to see other dogs and understand what's happening in other places and try to help people with this issue specifically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's definitely important that we have that personal experience with reactivity. Otherwise, I think there's a lack of empathy for the people who are working with these dogs.
Yeah, it can be extremely frustrating, right, to be in that situation. So yeah, you have to understand.
Yeah. So let's see. So you have a class coming up with me called Holistic Reactivity, which is looking at a kind of a whole dog approach. And for that, we've got a couple of dogs. We will be getting a couple of dogs that you're working with directly. And so, and they'll be remote, so in different locations on video. And so what's your ideal dog for that? Or what kind of cases are you hoping that we'll work with?
You kind of froze here.
Okay, so your question was, what kind of dogs are you hoping to work with? Dogs and people.
Well, we only have 2 dogs, right, that we're working with. So it would be nice to have different issues. Usually when we talk about reactivity, there is 2 main places where that kind of behavior comes from, which would be, anxiety, insecurity, fear, whatever, and frustration-based reactivity too. So if we had different types of dogs in that sense, that would be ideal, because then we can see what's actually similar in both cases, but also what has to be a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Great.
So that is like, it could be any dog, any size, doesn't matter. But if where the issue comes from is different, then we have greater view of what we can do.
Great. Yeah. And I think it would be nice to get one with definitely with frustration issues, because thinking back of the classes that we've taught, that we don't really have one specifically on that. So I'll try to, I have a course on it, but not the live version. So I think that would be good to have.
Cool.
All right. We'll give you one of those. All right. And let's see. And if you're watching this, we will be posting soon for the official criteria, and then you can share your dog's information using answering the questions we have, and then we'll pick from there. And Dante will be the one with the final view or final pick. So, all right. So Dante, what's your favorite tip to share for trainers for puppy socialization to prevent this reactivity?
To prevent reactivity, I believe that it's kind of vague, but less is more. That's probably what I would say to most people. I think it doesn't matter if it's reactivity that grows from frustration or from anxiety. When we're socializing puppies, there is, and depending on the time, of course, I think breeders have a lot to do with that too. But there's a bigger chance, of course, if you expose your puppy for too much or for too long, that it may be having experiences that are not as good as you thought they were. Even if it, physically you look and you see, oh, he's fine. I think that it's better to go smaller doses and make sure that they don't have to be over exciting either. They don't have to be extra happy. They just have to be as normal as possible. If you can have a positive outcome that is salient from an experience, good. If not, if it's just, the fact that it's not bad and it's just normal, that would be the ideal. That would be what I would, suggest to people. There's a lot of effort, to, oh, let's do puppy class. Let's do this. Oh, he has to meet this many people. He has to do this many things and these many surfaces. And this, just thinking for a person, that would be a lot, and for dogs, like if you think how long they live and how much time that represents in their life, and they're just being bombarded and exposed. So I think they also, just like adult dogs, they need a lot of rest in between. They need just, to be able to experience things in a more, more calm way. And I think that would be ideal for puppies.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So just calm, normal exposure, not aiming for every possible situation and every, for long periods of time with the most exciting experience possible.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be, because we don't. That's not what life is.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And we are preparing them for life, and then we get dogs that are like exuberant and overexcited because they see a person. And if we want dogs to be with us, to live with us, and to be, like social members of our community, they kind of have to fit in real life, right?
And real life involves, let's see if you can see her, a lot of downtime, right? Where
exactly. Exactly.
There's not a lot going on for the dog.
Yeah, especially now, like with quarantine. And so many dogs have to just hang at home, and and if you have made the dog associate your presence with, okay, something's going to happen, we're going to have to do something, we're going to walk, we're going to play, we're going to, and that is what happens to a lot of dogs where people are working all day. Having the presence of people in itself already excites the dog. And that is something that we start setting up when they're very young. And often they'll be just always, there's in the back of their head, there's a little extra excitement that, if you're talking about reactive dogs, that can be enough to, trigger something. So
that makes sense. Cool. Yeah. And I think a lot of that, the early advice with the big list, is that people don't follow advice very well. And so I think the assumption is that we might be doing like half of that.
Yeah. But there's one thing, and I read once in an article, and I thought it was like really interesting. For example, if you have a different surface and you have a puppy, okay, they can see the surface. They don't have necessarily to experience it. If they, I don't have to get a treat and say, hey, look, there's a different surface. I don't have to do that. Right? The puppy can see, they can go, they can sniff, they can touch if they want. But if they're okay here, it's about listening a little bit to the dog as well. There is guiding, of course, because you are the human, the adult. You know what things are and what's frisky and what's not. But they don't have to do everything at that moment. But if they just can see and experience, from afar, and see that things are normal, I think that's good. Enough. A puppy that doesn't see a buzz when it's a puppy is not going to be scared of buzzes. If it can hear from afar, if it can see from afar, like that's enough. When they grow, they'll have that in their heads. Okay, that's not the end of the world. Not being exposed at all is an issue, but when we do, I'd probably rather do it less and allow them to digest things in their own time and give them in that way the lead a little bit.
Yeah, that last
Mm,
piece is so important.
mm.
Okay, so we've got a lot of comments, at least from the folks. I just wanted to read them to you so you know they're here. So Julia says, Bayos from Germany. Heather, hello from PGH, Pennsylvania. So got folks from the UK.
Oh,
And Kevin says, it has always been interesting to me that the overreaction is a reinforced behavior, yet is so often maladaptive, having the opposite of the desired result. Leash reactivity, for example. In my experience, a dog that barks and lunges at another dog while leashed is more likely to generate the undesirable result of bark and lunge, coming closer, fight, than what I perceive to be the desired result. I often wonder if we, whoops, it's moving, if we need to look for the context in which that behavior was learned and originally reinforced to make sure we are targeting our treatment appropriately. And
mm.
wasn't quite a question in there, so I'm gonna.
Yeah, it's a big comment.
It's a big comment, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And I guess that sort of relates to the puppy piece in terms of looking at, so in terms of creating a dog that's doesn't have a reactivity issue, that we're avoiding the situation in which they would need to bark and lunge or whatever else because they're getting those coping skills.
yeah. I do agree with him as well, as in a sense that, let's say that puppy does have a reaction, and what happens in those first experiences, right? And that definitely counts and makes it, these strategies or these options to be more likely to happen. But again, going back to people, when people panic, like they will do stupid things that are not really logical, right?
Right,
You know,
exactly.
it's like sheep when they panic. They may, jump off a cliff. It's
Right.
just they're panicking, right? So if we think that way, then it's okay. A dog, yeah, it doesn't like the other dog. It will go after the other dog. But there is function. Maybe in the beginning it worked a couple of times, but depending on the level of arousal of the dog, then it, for us at least, it won't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have to. All we have to do is to be able to guide it to a different behavior that it initially also probably won't make any sense to the dog, but eventually with rehearsal and the consequences, it eventually may be a better choice for it. And it might realize that.
Right. And it reminds me of how with humans, we have these sort of moment to moment effective behaviors, right? So if we're feeling stressed, we go to Facebook, or we're something else, we do some, so these little coping strategies that we do, but in the big picture that they don't meet our needs. And that's like with the dogs, we hold the big picture because we have the brain and the bigger brain and the thumbs in terms of looking at, okay, is this actually meeting the needs of the organism overall versus just getting out of this one little situation.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. And often it will be just that little situation when the dog reacts. And that's why, as we say, holistic approach is trying to meet all these other needs. That's
great.
the idea, that
Yep.
eventually they don't even look like they have to do anything with reactivity, but they do.
Perfect. Yeah. Excellent. And so that brings up a question for me that you've mentioned in terms of the puppy. So when the puppy does have their first reaction, what would you advise people to do? If
I,
there's an accident, right? Something happens and the puppy's
yeah,
like,
and
oh.
and it happens, and it's actually quite often it happens. A lot
I
of
have reactions too. It's okay. It's
yeah,
if
yeah,
we didn't have reactions at all, we'd be dead. So
yeah, and most of the time, what I will do, if it's possible, because it also depends the context. You might just have to take the puppy away from there, but if it's possible, I'll wait, and if there's an actual risk or like danger for the puppy, of course I'll move it away enough to the point where I see it's not physically or too emotionally harmful for the puppy, and I'll wait and allow the dog, because that I find is very important, that the dog has the chance to actually realize what it is that it reacted to, or what is happening in the situation. So if I have that chance, I'll move the dog away and just give it time. so it may digest. And I use that word because it's to take in and process and decide what to do with that. Maybe you just dump it, but whatever it is, you just give the dog time and not try to be over like us, overreactive and over like, oh my God, what do I have to do? Oh no, oh, he reacted to that person. Now I have to make that person nice for him, like, and it just makes things worse in my view, because I think all they need at that moment is, move away a little bit, watch, give the dog time, choice, so it can actually move further away if it wants. But for a puppy, I think it's in these small opportunities that's very important, may make a big difference.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the word neuroception just popped in, which is that our brain's doing the digestion, right, of deciding, is this a safe thing or not safe thing. And yeah, I think we don't, historically, dog trainers haven't given dogs enough of an opportunity to just rehearse a little bit of neuroception, of just deciding, am I okay here?
Yeah.
And when they do, then that can really go into their history for in a resilient way.
Evolution gave them that.
Right.
They have to be able to do that. So
yeah. So, and that actually answers Gustavo's question. So he just said, what do we do if the dog has a reaction? Okay. And then Heather, my dog is more off leash than on leash. Let's see, we make sure there's a question here. Okay. Well, so when we do walk through the neighborhood on leash, he is much more reactive to dogs and kids. When he goes into reactive mode at that moment, I find it hard to get him to move away from the trigger. Then he calms. The next trigger seems worse. I get frustrated. How do I reduce the intensity of his reactivity?
Okay. So if you have a dog that reacts on leash, first thing that we would try to accomplish is try to work on is to reduce how much of a trigger the leash is to reacting. Okay, so teaching about leash pressure and actually rehearsing, and then I go back to the idea, you have to actually rehearse the, and I would do that when I competed or when I would do shows and stuff. I would actually rehearse how I behave, how I would pretend I'm holding my dog and shaking my hands, and I would breathe differently, and I would, act up all different and weird, and because I believe that's important. Now, so once that's done, or has been started, you still have the chance that the dog will react. Reacting again is very likely and more intensely, just because the dog now is just more aroused. Even though it looks calm, it probably needs much more time to recover and go back to a state where it would react less. So if it happens once, you would need then just to make sure that whatever other exposure is further away from the dog than the first one that he had. Okay, so ideally, if it happens once, you're just going to move away and make sure that walk you're not meeting people up close or kids up close anymore. Besides that, what I usually advise, and then that's what I do like as a pre-work as well, is to teach that concept of arousal and more or less arousal, excite and calm. And I find that it translates a little bit to that, to those moments where the dog gets overexcited. And if I have rehearsed calm, there's cues that will also help the dog to calm down because we've rehearsed those. And that may help after a reaction for the dog to calm down faster than it would normally, because now it has this other cue that would be emotionally also conditioned to help him calm down a little more. But if you can't move away and create space, you would have to create tools that will help you deal with the situation. But that's not the ideal, like something you really want to do every day. That's just something that if it happens, yeah, it's a mistake, but you'll try really hard not to expose the dog to those situations again, because that very easily becomes a pattern.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So I'm going to ask a question that was posed in advance. And while I'm asking that, so your microphone is kind of scratching on your
Oh, sorry.
shirt. Yeah, and I'm just wondering either if you could hold it or switch mics to the other mic.
Yeah, I might, because it's just that
Since we were only doing the one.
I don't know how it's going to be with the sound here, but I will figure this out in a second.
Okay.
Or I can just hold it like this.
Okay, that works too. But then you can't, gesticulate as much. Okay, so Shelly asked, so first of all, Dante lives in Brazil, and I was just or last year when I was in Sao Paulo, there are 20 million people in Sao Paulo. Is that correct? And you don't live in Sao Paulo proper, right?
No, I live about 5 hours away. I grew up in Sao Paulo, and I lived in Canada for 9 years. When I came back, I said, yeah, maybe I want something a little quieter. So I came to the town I live today. That is, population here is 400,000.
Gotcha.
It's much smaller.
Much smaller, yeah, than 20 million. And so you've had kind of a range of experience. And so Shelley asked, are dogs in Brazil as reactive as they are in the US? And I don't know if you have a lot of US experience, but feel free to compare to Canada. And if not, what do you think is the reason?
I think they're very similar. And the places where you'll see more reactivity is what is similar, actually. The more you are, in the more urban areas, especially here, and our culture, Brazilian culture around dogs, is much more recent than in the US, than the American or European. So there's a lot of people that are now, in the last 10 years, getting their first dogs, like to live in their homes. Before maybe they had dogs when they lived with their parents, the dogs were in the yard, or chained or something like that. So a lot of people do not have much experience on how to own dogs, and also about dogs' needs. So a lot of times when people live in urban areas where they're like new to this, that's a lot of times when things get a little more difficult. And of course, the environment itself is very stressful for a lot of dogs, and dogs become, like, breeds become popular. So there's a lot of people living with border collies in their apartment, and they have no idea what that dog is and what they should be doing with the dog. And yeah, then the natural thing of, dogs will start getting behavioral issues. But as far as, difference between dogs, I don't see much. I think it's very simple. Once dogs are owned, and here we still have a lot of, village dogs, they call, right? The dogs that live on streets, and often will go bike, and you're on trails or dirt roads, and all these dogs are there, and they chase you, and all these things. And these dogs, in general, are not reactive, even if they have breeds that you can clearly see they have some breed in them. Even then, you'll see that, even, let's say, oh, it's a dog that, it's mixed to a breed that likes to chase things. Even then, it's much less than dogs that are actually owned and have homes, and all the limitations of living in a home brings. I think that's what actually causes the most. People.
So yeah, people. We are the cause of their reactivity. Yes. Well, and I had just this really interesting comparison back and forth between, I took my cat to my mom's house, so he travels with me, and as I took him there, he didn't, I decided to leave him there for a couple of weeks, and then I went home again. So I hadn't seen him for a couple of weeks, and here I had been keeping him inside a lot more, and we're just kind of readjusting to a new routine since Bean was eaten by a coyote. And so I'm protecting him and keeping him inside more. And so he's getting more bitey and like trying to wrestle with the dog, and the dog's having none of it, and going after me. And when I was with him at my mom's, it was none of it. He was perfect. He was just like super lovey-dovey, not bitey. And because all of his needs were met, he's in the woods there, he's walking around, he's getting to go hunt, and without the restrictions of this human society.
Yeah. I get that with my border collie. She's 8, and she's not reactive, but she gets really overwhelmed by social encounters with people. She gets really, And I used to travel a lot to Europe every year to go compete and stay there for a month too, like traveling around, competing with a dog. And she was a completely different dog, because there's also habituation, right? So she just, okay, this is what we do. There's all these walks and there's all these people, all these dogs, and we take the train and we go this place and we go to a cafe, and she was so much like, and she was never stressed. It's not like, oh, she can handle this, but she's no, she was a completely different dog. And then we come here, just the fact that we don't do, it's not that she has to meet people all the time, just not doing that is enough to make all that come back. So it's habituation, right? She's not really changed. She hasn't really changed in her core, like how she sees. It's just, okay, now like she's adapts, but it's very easy to come back to whatever it was happening before.
Yeah, behavior is very context specific, and there's that sort of return of fear when you go back to the original space. So okay, so question here from let's see. These questions have already been answered. Jessica, is it possible to get a reactive dog into agility? If so, what are your tips on that? So a dog who's currently displaying reactive behavior.
Okay. Well, of course, every dog's different. And there will be dogs that I had. Actually, one of my reactive dogs, she was very people reactive, more specifically to men. Mixed breed, we got her about a year old. She had a very strong bark, very scary to people. She was able to compete and actually travel abroad, competing in different countries. And, like, she never loved people, but she learned, especially in that context, it's much easier for like teaching a sport, for example, because it is a specific context, and the dog can learn to feel safe and very comfortable in that space. So I find that it's actually probably easier than with reactivity in like that's more generalized, like in different, if you want to, just train in general. But I find it also easier if you're talking about people, because people are more predictable and you can talk to people and tell them how to react or what not to do. And if you're talking about other dogs, let's say you go to a trial for agility, what other dogs are doing is something that's very much out of your control. So it becomes a little more difficult when you have to let go of your dog, take the leash off, and there's, maybe a bunch of dogs around and someone starts barking or someone starts running and chase. You don't have as much control of that. So I find it's a little harder when it's just dog to dog reactivity, but many associations just make sure that the places where dogs compete are very safe. So they fence everything, and so no one can come in or leave. But I don't think that's ideal. I think the ideal is that, not that there's no fencing, but there's no need for it, right? That I'm not worried that my dog's gonna leave the ring or that some other dog's gonna come in the ring. But if you're just talking about doing agility in general, let's say at a club, I find it very doable and very useful too. I think it's a very good confidence boost for a dog. So I would suggest, and we'll talk maybe more about that later, but rehearsing, as you said in the beginning, like rehearsing, just making things seem very easy for the dog before you present it with challenges that come from whatever trigger that causes reactivity.
And I love that distinction you made between doing agility and competing in agility. And for me, that was with Peanut. I finally decided, you know what, he's doing fine here. He's coping with it. But he's coping. It's not like he doesn't do the competitions because he loves competing. He does them because he loves me and he loves agility. And we can do that without the crowd aspect.
Yeah. There's obviously dogs that love that really love the competition, but many don't. They're just they couldn't care less if it was your backyard or the competition.
Exactly. I think he loved the 16 seconds of running, not so much the sitting around in the kennel and all the pieces. But if you have a camp,
sorry,
just if you can drive to a place and bring a camper, for example, instead of having them in a kennel, that's so much easier on the dog.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I slowed down in competition, because I couldn't handle all of that.
Yeah, I think me too. All right. Let's see. So Christine, who's watching live, she says, I have a pup that has never had positive dog-to-dog interactions except with my other pup. Within his first 18 months of life, he was bitten by unrestrained dogs 4 times, broken skin, and bowled over. And then he started pouncing on other dogs when they get within 6 feet. So we don't interact anymore. Is it likely that this behavior will fade over time with just long distance interactions and no contact?
My goal would, because when she says like this behavior will fade, yes, I do believe the behavior of, pouncing or, going after a dog when it's 6 feet away, with work, it will, but I'm not sure about, how far she wants the fading to go. Like, do you want your dog to go play with the other dog? That is something that I find maybe questionable. Depends a little bit more on the individual, or how far it will go or it will reach as far as, like being social with other dogs. When people ask, like, how much can I fix this dog? It depends what fixing means, where you want to get to. It's just a matter of a dog not reacting anymore and feeling comfortable when it's walking and dogs are near and, it's good, it's feeling okay. Or do you want the dog to, feel comfortable playing with other dogs? Depending on the experiences, I find it very difficult, but not knowing the case, it's hard to say. But depending on some, yes, the dog will feel very comfortable. But I find that just distance as well is very important for confidence and everything, but more work, I would suggest probably more work, and with very specific dogs, and creating good experiences. But still, the environment may be very unpredictable, and one experience of a dog chasing or attacking your dog may just bring the whole thing back that this dog has experienced before. So I'm not sure about becoming as what people call a solid dog. Oh no, this dog will be able to handle all these situations. I don't think every dog can or should be pushed or be asked to certain things, but definitely improve. If that's the goal. I don't know if I make myself clear.
I think so. Yeah. And just, yeah. And I'll just add the piece of, in terms of, if you're looking for resilience for the, if another dog were to run up, then just this idea of only doing distance, which Christine had asked about, that tends to not really build resilience. It just sort of builds this, like, okay, I can handle dogs from a distance, but without that understanding of, like, this is how other dogs play, this is what who my friends are, that without that you won't necessarily get as much resilience.
Okay. I find that it is social learning. It ends up having to be learned in this being social, right? Like, actually, right. There's some kind of interaction that has to happen.
Yeah, which is why we have Zoom, for example, because humans can't go without the social piece either.
Yeah.
All right. Linda asked, are German Shepherds just wary? As let's see, make sure as a puppy, mine was afraid of taking walks, so I allowed her to sit on the lawn, which she likes. She's not comfortable with walking, but gets anxiety when there are other dogs. So we make space and she calms down. She's met non-reactive dogs and has seen them regularly for years, but is still frightened of them initially. So the question is, are German Shepherds just wary?
Especially when they're young, and when you're reaching social maturity, there's a period where they become a little more weary, and many of them at least. And if you think of individuals, yes, there's differences, but as a breed in general, the way they react is very normal for them. Like the barking and seeing anything that's different or that they don't recognize as being okay or normal, their reaction is usually very intense, or at least we feel it as being very intense, but it's very normal for a German Shepherd. Now, always being worried about meeting other dogs, even the dogs that she knows already, like as she said, like it interacts with other dogs and it's okay, but still is always a little bit worried at the beginning, maybe just a little bit of insecurity in general with social interactions. If that's going to change, I don't know what the age of the dog is, and if she mentioned 4 already. Okay. And if that has always been like that, I think it may also have to do not just the German Shepherd, but the individual and how she is in general. If that can improve, I do think if these interactions are maybe a little more thought, and maybe try to see what actually, or at what moment the dog actually shows to be a little bit unsure, that could help set up a plan so you actually work more with when the dog is feeling comfortable, when wants or approaches or looks for the interaction. It's hard to say when you don't see how the dog reacts, or do we just let them in the yard? Or is it when we're walking on leash and the dog walks up to her? Is it her coming to the dog? Like, we don't know. And if it changes in all these different contexts or not, there's a lot of things that can influence, but if it's still happening, I think it may be the nature of the interactions and some of your dogs specifically insecurities, right? I don't know if that also is satisfactory for an answer.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
very
that's great.
hard. It's very hard to answer when you don't see or don't know anything about it.
Right.
Because it could be so many things, right? But thinking about age, if it has been happening for so long, it also, as I said before, some reactions, they just become part of how we do things because it's being done for so many times and it's always the same way. So always the same expectations. And even if you change context, okay, I still do the same way because it's a dog approaching. So not that it can't be changed, but it doesn't really explain anymore how the dog's actually seeing those things. It's just the way it's always seen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love that piece of definitely it's the dog's an individual, and whether even though yes, German Shepherds tend to be a little bit more spooky, especially in the States, that it doesn't mean they can't work on changing those habitual patterns to some degree.
Yeah.
And yeah, so Gustavo said, and this is just more of a comment, but I think you can reflect on it if you want. I think you should highlight that keeping the dog in the situation and giving him time to calm down is not the same as exposure to some trigger expecting it to calm down. So it's not like flooding. We don't want to just like, oh, here's a trigger that's you're freaking out about, and we'll set that up so you can freak out and then calm down again.
Yeah. It's just a difference between flooding and doing a gradual exposure. And it's interesting because basically the only difference there is how close it is.
Right.
To
matter of degree.
Yeah. Maybe how much you allow it to react to it or not, how much you respond to the dog's actions regarding to the stimulus as well. Usually a lot of people that do flooding, which has become very popular, I know around the world through trainers using it and spreading that concept. Usually it's not just the exposure, but also limiting the dog's response. Like, okay, you are going to have to deal with this and you're not going to be able to do this, this, or this. It's bringing sort of to, what is the term? Helplessness.
Learned helplessness. Yes,
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think the danger of flooding is twofold. That one, we're harming the dog by putting them in situations that are more than they can handle. And it's also a lot of times having dogs is practice for people having children. And if we get in that habit of, oh, it's okay to put people into situations that are too difficult, and then they freak out and they calm down again, then we get this sort of mental health crisis that's been going on for
Yeah,
years.
I actually do think people do that already. People have done and do that, especially to small kids.
Right.
My brother-in-law, like, always hated going to like places with their parents because he was always flooded because he was cute and he had big cheeks and people are always on him and, you know, pinching his cheeks and you know, just like a dog, he would go to these places, he would hate, and he would be hiding every time he saw someone. He would hide behind mom or dad. If he had big teeth, he would probably have big people.
Yeah.
So
Agreed.
yeah, we I think a lot of what we do with dogs, we also do with people. It's learning for everything, for all aspects of life. Yeah.
Yes. All right. And let's see. So Emmy says, and we're at 10:56, so we're about an hour. And not that, so we can go over a little bit, but just so you know. Emmy says, do you have advice for those of us with guard dog breeds who are reactive? I train a lot with treats, rewarding him for making the correct assessments when a person walks by, but sometimes I think I should intervene less. I'm just not sure he's getting the reinforcement if I don't provide it with a treat.
Okay. Yeah, there is this whole breed function, right? And what they were supposed to be doing and how they react, how natural it is, and how can we call that reactivity, or is it just like a breed thing that the dog does that? It is being bred to do that for, you know, a long time, and it's part of its genetics. What can we do? And some dogs, they will react, and especially some guard breeds, they will react, and changing their emotional state, trying, let's say, okay, look this way and eat, you know, as if we were treating it as if the dog was actually worried about the stimulus. Of course, there's a level of worry in every guard dog. There has to be. If it's not worried at all, it's never going to react, right? There has to be a little tiny bit, but most of its reward comes from the action of doing it and the result, people walking away, right? So I think that in many cases, allowing it is a way to get less of it. Not allowing it may get a little bit conflictive for some dogs. So, but how much you allow it is what I believe we have to work on. If it's crazy and the dog doesn't stop, then it's just, you know, too much. Now, I think that initially it's just like seeing a dog. I'm here and there's something that my dog's reacting that is 10 meters away or 30 feet away for you Americans. And my dog barks, and I tell my dog, no, don't bark, come here, there's a treat. Oh, look, this is nice, this is nice, this is nice. And, you know, it goes back to that thing. Maybe the bark is what it needs to do, and then eventually it will notice that it doesn't really have to, right? Because if it has enough space, enough distance, and it gets the reinforcement that it needs from that action, but also from what comes after, I do believe that many dogs just reduce. But if you can go in and ask the dog, especially guard breeds, some of the herding breeds, to actually ask for the dog to do something, but not just try to get their attention away from whatever they were doing before, I think that helps. It's like not giving a job, but giving something else to do. Let's say, oh, my dog, oh, and I'll give you an example. Maybe that's more clear than my explanation. I know that's a little crappy. My dog, and I have a big dog here, and it sees whatever, it's a guard dog, and I'm here is very common that people will have dogs in their yard and they have gates, and so the dog barks because it sees someone walking in front of the gate. It's just like sort of territorial bark. That's pretty normal, right? Very common. Dogs will do that. How much it does that may be okay, or maybe stressful for him and for me and for my neighbors and everything else. So, okay, the dog barked. Okay, that's what you do. you're a guard dog. Now, that's good. Come here. Now, sit. Very good. Now I'm rewarding it for coming, for sitting, for, like it's getting enjoyment from whatever it did is part of its breed, but also from coming away to do something else, not just the idea, oh no, I'm not allowed to do what I wanted to do. I don't want to pull my dog away and tell it to not do something. I said, okay, good, you did this. Now come, let's do something else. And I do think that that helps dogs to just, as much as it's possible, to reduce its level of reaction or the amount of reaction. Because especially some contests like gates, people will always walk past, and reinforcement will always come eventually from that, right? From people walking past. So guard breeds I would allow to a certain extent if it's socially acceptable, and ask my dog to perform something else. But it's not treated the same way as a dog that is actually worried about, like it's anxious and it's, and making positive emotional associations to something that the dog already wants, it's already excited about seeing. It's different from, a dog that's actually worried about that. There's dogs that see someone, oh, it's my opportunity to go and bark and be, and do this. And so I think that they receive our information in a different way, and can be a little conflicting for them to just like, pull them from that to this and not give them something else to do. Just reinforcing and trying to make like nice connections don't always give the results that we expect, and often it's because of that, because the way they see the trigger is not as bad as we think. It's actually quite rewarding for many dogs.
Right. And to some extent, the reinforcer is actually, or to a large extent, the treat is sort of a side reinforcer, but the main reinforcer is the consequence that's happening in the environment. And if we're distracting them away with the treat, then it sort of misses that opportunity to learn to do something else.
And can you imagine for a dog that is a guard to be distracted from what it's supposed to be guarding?
Right.
It's like, oh, I do want to do this. Like, okay, so we'll make it just more clear cut. Okay, you did it, good. Now it's time we do this other thing here, and it can be very fun. But it just make it more clear for the dog when it stops. And I do believe that naturally also makes things less and less intense.
Got it. So helping them know when they're off the clock a little bit. Like,
basically,
okay, yeah, you did it. Thank you. Now
yeah, basically, that's it. And that's what I do to my dogs when they bark when they hear something outside. They're dogs. Yeah. They have, they will bark, and then okay, thank you, and then everybody knows. Oh, good, we did it.
Exactly. Cool. All right. So I think we'll do just a few more questions if you have time for that. Yeah. Does that work for you?
Okay. Yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah. Okay, cool. Time just flies. It's much faster than we anticipate.
It does. Yeah. So, and then I just want to remind folks that, so Dante will be teaching a class on grishastewart.com or grisha.thinkific.com soon, which I'm excited about. And we'll be looking for dogs for him to work with fairly soon. So keep an eye out for that. So, and all right. So, oh, and also just a couple other announcements we have. So next Thursday, I'm doing a bat chat, which is basically I'll answer questions that you all have about bat. Usually people share videos, and then I can go through those videos line by line. And I do that. So this I'll be doing also in the bat Facebook group and in my bat chat course on my website. And then Susan Friedman is coming up. And actually, let me just do a quick screen share about these, and then we'll go back to asking Dante some more questions. Let's see. All right. So, yeah. So also Susan Friedman, Why Animals Need Trainers Who Adhere to the Least Intrusive Principle. I think if you haven't heard Susan Friedman talk, you absolutely need to go. And if you have heard her talk, you know why you need to go. this
Yeah,
is a
I love
new
her.
webinar, right? I
Yeah,
always feel
so
like I'm being trained every time I'm talking to Susan.
yeah, she's great. Yeah.
And then Carrie Jordan will do a class on dog photography, then Dante's class. We've got a couple others in there, but these are the ones I wanted to highlight. And Dante, I don't know if you know about on who Anders Hallgren is, but he's a trainer in Sweden.
Yeah, it's from Sweden. Yeah, he does a
Yeah,
lot of. He's got that book, doesn't he?
the stress and anxiety, also
Yeah,
enrichment, was kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
his baby, and then this canine fire detectors, the smoke alarm training. So that one will be fun because I've read that little book, but I didn't put it into practice, and so it'll be a nice
Cool.
like reminder. Okay, oh dear, come on. I love Zoom because then I get into one place and then I forget how to get back out. Uh, where is it? Oh, come on. Oh, there it is. Over. This is what I get for having two screens. Okay,
Oh, you
it's
had
over
two
there.
screens. All right.
I was like, shoot, it's gone. All right. So Heather said, I'll be so the same person asked before with the guard dog. I'll be moving into a new home with a fenced-in yard. Currently, our home has a big yard with no fence, and they know their boundaries. My question is, can the fenced-in yard create more reactivity or frustration?
It could. Yeah, it could. It just depends if they're just left there and the experiences they have. And but it's normal that any sort of kind of barrier may create frustration. But it's a matter of working on it and maybe introducing it a little bit because they'll probably be a little more um, aware in the first days and weeks that they're into this new place. They're not so used to what's happening and who's passing by and what dogs. So I would probably make that introduction to if you're going to leave them in the yard anytime by themselves, that to make that introduction to whatever is happening outside gradually, not just leave them there, because that's there's more chance that they'll react, and then there's a barrier, and then kind of builds up.
Yeah, try not to have them unsupervised at the beginning.
Yeah.
So like you said, the behavior it's open to reinforcement as soon as it starts happening. So by the environment. All right. So Hope says, thinking about puppies' initial response to a stimulus, my girl in her early months, 4 to 7, would do a sit and become very quiet. Now at 12 months, she is launching herself at dogs and some people. Do you find this is an age related change or the stimulus has history now? We are training in agility, nose work, and tricks and have done some classes.
Okay, so she's 1 now?
She's 1 now. Yeah. Do you find this
Yeah.
an age related change or the stimulus now has history? So why is it getting worse, essentially?
Well, the sitting and being quiet was probably already a sign that of discomfort, right? And it's very common that when we see that, we think things are okay, and other people also, and that may have allowed things to become a little too close or too much for her. And depending on the day, maybe she was a little bit more tired or stressed from whatever happened, and that strategy didn't quite work very well. And okay, I explode. And as we said, if it works once, there's a good chance they're going to do it again. And eventually it may become just something that they do. Like, just like she would go to sit, now she goes to something else. But it could, I'm not sure if it has to do with age. Could be, especially when they go into social maturity. It's less likely that they will behave submissive like a puppy would. And so that change may be related to the age, but the fact that she was already showing not to be comfortable as a young dog, as younger, was probably a sign that that could be something that would be coming later.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there is a chance of age, but there was from what we know, there were signs that were actually telling there's something, the dog is uncomfortable with the situation, or these situations.
Okay, and we've got two more questions. So one is from Anna. How do you work with a dog who chases cats and starts to pull wildly on leash, even with the smell of cats?
Yeah, I had this friend once that actually had a shirt that said, my dog loves cats because they taste like chicken. And I just heard a horrible story today of a person that wanted to bring their dog to our daycare facility, my wife's daycare facility, and they killed 18 cats already. So, yeah.
No, yeah, with the small dogs and yeah.
Yeah, no, and one dog that actually lived in the house. All in the same way, very graphic. I'm not going to talk anymore about that. Okay, so scent, yeah, scent is very important, very much information through scent. And I do work just, as I mentioned, when it's reactivity through frustration, you know, like dog wants to seize the cat as prey or whatever, there is a lot of work that has to be done on the side of self-control, like the dog being able to control its instincts, and redirection, placing its instincts somewhere else where it's okay. And the idea of scent, I may use the same way I would use for dogs that are anxious about things. I had a dog that would bark if someone different had been to the house. She would walk in with her nose up and going crazy, barking, 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 because she knew there was a scent of a different person. So the idea of, for that would actually be working on self-control, working on teaching the dog different alternatives for that chase behavior. But when we talk about scent, that may be one of the first steps when the dog's actually not seeing any cats, but do interact with the scent, making the dog associate the scent with something that's not chasing, something calm. But then it would mean, okay, I get a towel and I rub on a cat, and my dog has to realize, okay, the scent of cat may lead to something else, right? With the dog that's scared, I would make it lead to, okay, I see the scent, I don't want to go to the scent because the dog is scared, right? This case, the dog wants to go to the scent. I make, okay, there's a scent. If I lead the other way, there's fun and there is reinforcement. Or if I get to the scent, I have to go past the scent to reach fun and reinforcement. When I talk about anxiety, there's scent. I teach the dog, go to scent because that leads into reinforcement. Understand? Mm-hmm. If we're talking just about, if we're talking just about the scent aspect, which would be definitely one thing that I would start working with, you know, like before I can even think about exposing dog to cats. But yeah.
Great, thank you. All right, and then I have a geeking out question for you.
Okay.
I
love geeking out.
Excellent. So you mentioned to me that you did a YouTube recently for motivation, and so I'll just give a little overview. But so as you know, the Yerkes-Dodson law was originally developed in 1908 by a couple of psychologists, Robert Yerkes and John Dillingham Dodson, and it's about the relationship between performance and pressure, and the pressure, you know, kind of on us. So different tasks require different levels of arousal for the best performance. And for example, if you're trying to do something that's really difficult or intellectually demanding, then you actually want a lower level of arousal to get concentration. And tasks demanding stamina or persistence, then it's better to have a higher level of arousal for performance to increase the motivation. And so the question is, how do you think the Yerkes-Dodson law applies to working with reactivity, and how is that different to say, working with agility?
Okay. Actually, I don't think it's different from working with agility. Okay. And I think we talked a little bit about this in the beginning when we talked about rehearsing behavior. Because what happens is, as you mentioned, if the task is requires a lot of thinking, and it's difficult for the person, the same, right, as for the dogs, you need less arousal. So I will only expose a dog to a higher level of arousal once the task asked, the behavior patterns that I introduced, or these skills, the exercises, are easy for the dog. And that's my idea, right? So yes, I cannot have the dog aroused if it's not ready, and finding it very natural and fluid to perform the behaviors that I want it to perform in that state of arousal. And to learn those, it will have to learn in a lower state of arousal. Then I'll practice it enough to the point where it's like easy for the dog, until then can also perform in a state of arousal. And it's exactly the same with agility. And a place where many people fail being in treating dogs with reactivity issues or dog sports is exactly the fact that when a dog is exposed to whatever situation where it's more aroused, being you running can be enough in an agility course, or people around, or let's say in the sports, or a dog that's exposed to a situation where there's too many people, or people are too close, or dogs, or barking, whatever. Most of the time they're exposed before they find it comfortable and easy to perform the behaviors that you actually want them to. And that's where the whole preparation comes in. So one thing that I wanted to touch here is one of the things that are very interesting about working with an approach that is holistic. And when you're talking about, like dealing with all these areas of the dog's lives, like what is mind, what, if it's very important, like the physical body, right? How the dog's feeling and its emotions, and all of this will affect the social aspect, not only with you, but how the dog deals with everything else. But just the fact that you spend enough time teaching the dog different skills, different tools, different ways of doing things, when it's presented to a situation where it's where there's more arousal, there's two things that happen. First, it has more options of things that it may perform because other things come easy, but also there's a fact that it will get aroused less. So it's two ways that this works. It's not just like, oh, I have something that I know very well and I can do it at a very high level of arousal. No, I know it so well that now I'm not going to be as aroused in that same situation. So it works both ways, right? It will handle arousal better, but also it will get aroused more. It will be more difficult to get as aroused as before.
They're staying more, their systems are staying more level.
Exactly, and basically because they know better how to do other things, like they have other options, right? Different ways of behaving, and
predictability, controllability, all of that leads into
and even, and sorry, but even
no, you go ahead.
even it goes beyond. It is weird, but it's, that's what we have, I have taken a bunch of students and followed them through a whole process of, like live consults and teaching, like every day, sending me videos like for 12 weeks. And most of the dogs that haven't even been exposed to whatever triggers they had that were upsetting to them in the beginning, after the second month, like 8 weeks, 10 weeks, they were exposed, not even like in ways that they would be exposed before and react. And they would simply not react the same way, just because they had enough of other things that they were doing. It's interesting. There is empirical explanations of why this happens, but I don't know of any study that actually explains, why doing all these other things and, learning to relax, learning tricks, learning to know more about his body, learning to know, find solutions, think of things in a different way, how this helps the dog now to see that same thing and now not feel as threatened, or not feel as even if it's a situation that it doesn't necessarily feel under control or predictability of the situation. It's more like control and predictability of how I do.
Yeah, internally, right.
Yeah. So that I find is fascinating, and it's something that I really want to share with as many dogs and people as possible, because it's, to me, a breakthrough, a way of seeing things. Just like we talked about the puppy, they just need time. It's not just about time. You teach a lot of stuff too, but they have everything in them to make this work. We just have to help them.
Mm-hmm. I love that approach. Thank you so much. And that, it reminds me of like human mindfulness, right? Meditating has nothing to do with going out and doing the rest of my work, but it makes everything else easier. So
yeah,
kind of similar.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I wanted to have one final question, which is just whether you have anything else that you wanted to add or make sure people know about what projects you're working on, any of that sort of thing.
Well, I have a lot of projects here in Brazil, and it's all in Portuguese. So if you speak Portuguese or are interested, where you can email me actually at dante@dante.works.com, and but also visit my website dantecamacho.com, and there's a bunch of stuff happening. It's been a little different this year because of the pandemic. I had a lot of trips that were scheduled, but everything's changed. So we're kind of just trying to do stuff here. I work a lot of online classes, less like courses. So that's mostly what I do here. As far as about the teaching and the program and the reactivity stuff, maybe just to let people know that our class is going to be talking about those first steps, the preparation that I believe is important and necessary for the dogs before we actually go into behavioral modification plans and all of that, because that will adapt to each dog. But it's the preparation that for most dogs will be the same and will benefit all dogs. So
I'm excited for all of those projects, but especially the course, because I'll be there for that. So September 28th, everyone, and you can sign up for that now. And I put a link to Dante's website in the video as well. So if you wanted to check that out, looks like at least Maggie speaks Portuguese. And I was going to try to pronounce it, but then I decided that I can't do that. Because of all languages, Portuguese tends to give me the most trouble.
Yeah. And so. It's maybe I think on Instagram now and Facebook they are translating stuff, right? When you do posts, you can actually translate. Sometimes it shows out already in a different language. Like you write something in English and it shows to me in Portuguese or something like that.
Yeah.
So maybe people can follow like social media maybe and still get understand something. I post a lot of videos too. And sometimes of training, and that may be fun for some people too.
Yeah, to at least see the videos of those. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Dante. We could probably talk for hours, but this is a good stopping point. And I went right through the talking where you were going to talk. I wanted to say one more thing before we sign off, which is that for the rest of the folks, that Michael Shikashio's last class is today. So if you wanted to join in that live class, do. And Dante, you've been watching that. Is that true, or a little bit?
Yeah, and I love it. It's very good. I love Michael. I had done other courses with him. He's a very, very good speaker. Very clear. He makes things like sing and sound much easier, much clearer to understand. So I really like the way he teaches, and yeah, it's really good.
Me too.
Love the course. The class is really good too.
Yeah, and there's plenty of learning to go around. So attend Michael's class and then attend Dante's later in September. So thank you all. Have a great day. Thanks, Dante.
Thank you.
We're clear.
Oh,
Thank you for that.
oh, thank you. I'm sorry for, I kind of got lost a couple of
Don't be
times there when
sorry. That was great.
I was trying to answer stuff, and then my mind starts tripping. Like, but what if this dog is like this, and what if that is that, and what? Then you can't really give a clear answer. That's the problem that I have. That's that's it is.
It sounded great. And you expressed the complexity while still having some solid answer as well. So I think it worked out.
Oh, good. It was really good. I really enjoyed it, and thank you very much. And the questions were good, and you're very, you make people feel very comfortable. So it's
good.
Very good.
I just interrupt you a lot, so that works out.
You have to, probably. I didn't feel like I was interrupted a lot, but I do feel when I'm like just blah, 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 and never stopping. So I hope people understand. Sometimes I find like, some words I miss. It just gets, what word would I use here? Because I'm often translating things.
Right.
Often I do just speak English, but there's some points where I get stuck and then I have to translate, think in Portuguese, how would that sound in English? But I guess, yeah, people understand. Probably people that speak much worse English than me. So it's okay.
Oh, your English is great. And yeah, most people who speak English as a second language don't know the dog trainer words. So that it was fabulous. So yeah, my thing, I was like, it's an interview. I need to stop trying to teach at the same time. I just need to ask the questions and let you answer them.
No, but I actually, when I stopped talking and you said something, I thought it was very good. And I was actually expecting that.
Okay.
Because I think that your input very often makes things more clear to the public that you're talking to, because very often they follow you and they already know what you're talking about or how you talk. So when I say something and I ask you, like, do I make myself clear? Then you say yes, and then you said what you understood of that and what your opinion is, then it just makes me, oh, okay. So now people.
She understood what I was saying, and sort of make a bridge between you and
exactly.
my folks.
Yeah. So hopefully in the course it will be easier, because it is easier